Welcome back to the Passion Creative Podcast. This is the fantastical and functional future of filmmaking. All right, well, welcome in. My name is James Vore. I am our editorial manager here at Passion, and I'm pretty pumped because today is going to be a fun one. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Yeah, so my name's Kevin. Been on staff at Passion for about 4 years or so. I think my title is senior filmmaker, which sounds a little bit pretentious. I don't like to think I'm quite as pretentious as my title makes me seem.
Sounds established.
But yeah, we do, so we kind of have a team of generalists. So I do like a little bit of writing, directing, like a lot of shooting, a lot of editing as well, just kind of all parts of the filmmaking process.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'm Zach. I've been here on staff 2 years now, contracted for like 6 years. I'm the film director, so it just means I deal with emails and budgets.
Runs the game.
A lot of spreadsheets.
Yeah.
It's your favorite thing, I'm sure.
That's right.
I want to dive into a little bit of your histories, not maybe all the way back, but talk to me about maybe the first films you guys ever made.
Oh boy. They're on YouTube if you're persistent enough with your searching.
Okay.
Some like stupid backyard wrestling videos and stuff like that were my first things.
Yeah.
I just started out making like dumb stuff with my brother and then just kind of kept on making more and more and more stuff and then eventually landed in this chair somehow.
It's awesome.
Yeah. My first one was like skate videos.
Oh.
So I was just the guy running around with a camera.
Yeah.
And they weren't good, and we didn't do anything with them. So I just have lots of skating footage that we never did anything with.
I asked that question though because I think there's probably a lot of people watching who are filmmakers in the church, and they realized early on, like, hey, I love to do this. Is this something that I could actually like lean into for a profession? And it's very interesting because you can kind of go one of two routes with that, with any kind of artistic thing, where you go and you do your own thing and you're completely freelance, and that has all of its opportunities and challenges. Or you can be a part of an organization, in y'all's circumstance, a part of a church. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering, for you guys, what does it feel like to be doing what you love to do, plugged into a church? Why does that feel like it's important in your life?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the like first and primary answer for me is that like I want to do things that actually matter. And I think there's nothing in the world that matters more than like leveraging your time and your talents and gifts like for the sake of the kingdom in the context of the local church. And that doesn't have to be on staff. That doesn't have to be like using your creative gift.
Yeah.
But, for me, I just got this opportunity to do that. And I thought like, what better way to spend my life? So that's been huge. And the other big part for me is just the community.
Yeah.
Like I love all the people on our team. It's just like so much fun working with them like day to day. And it's awesome to work with like a really consistent group of people over time so that you like get in grooves and, develop good shorthand and like that chemistry outside of set really like works its way into the creative process. So that's two things that I love about being here at an organization, at a church.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think mine are pretty much the same thing. For me, it's really just, if I'm going to make something beautiful, I don't want it to be like about me. Right.
Yeah.
So, Pastor Louis is really good about like, we want to like inspire people's hearts and mind to like experience Jesus, right? So for me, that's a big deal of being able to make beautiful, inspiring things that aren't pointing back to me, aren't pointing to Coca-Cola.
Right.
They're drawing people into the Savior of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not that there's anything wrong with creating those kinds of things. Like, of course, that's incredible art, But where we sit right now is you guys are part of a church and you're creating films and short films and pieces that are, like you just said, inspiring people to kind of look up and see Jesus. And so it kind of leads me to the next question. I'm interested in y'all's thoughts as you're looking at maybe the church as a whole, as to, is it important for us to be making these pieces? Is it important for filmmakers to be involved in the church? Or maybe said a different way, is it important for the church to be involved in film?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as you like look back over the history of the church, like for so much of church history, the church was at like the forefront of artistic expression. I think the filmmakers and designers and like musicians of today's church are like in the same tradition of like the people who painted the Sistine Chapel. Like we believe, just like the historical church has always believed, that like we serve a creative God who inspires our creativity, empowers our creativity, and that our like creative excellence glorifies him. So Yeah, I think like art is massively important both to like the mission of the church and to like who we are, our like identity as people.
Yeah, I think too, like we want to get people involved, as many people as we can involved in the church.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we kind of just narrow it down to the typical kind of church thing, which is like worship,
Right.
production, and like teaching, you know, a lot of people in there don't see themselves in that. They're like, okay, I can just be on the parking team, but not feel like I'm using my gifts. And so what's crazy about Passion is we allow for people that are like actors, that are writers, that are grip guys that are on film sets, that are DPs, to come and use their gifts for the church and not feel like, oh, well, I'm just kind of doing this because there's no other like possibility for me here.
Yeah, I like that. You touched on the team as being a part of your favorite thing. A lot of the team is here right now, which is super cool. What does the team dynamic look like for you guys? Because obviously we have probably a larger film team compared to maybe a lot of churches. And so there's probably some people out there watching who maybe they do everything and they're trying to figure out, okay, if I have budget for a hire, like what's my strategic hire? Like what's the next thing? How does our team kind of function? I know, Zach, from your leadership.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin, what was the team like 2.5 years ago, really? And like where we are today? Because I think people have like a misconception too of like, we've always been a big team.
Yeah.
And what we've put out has like been supported by a big team, but that's not the case either.
Yeah, I mean, like 4 years ago, we had 0 full-time like film or video people on staff at all.
Wow.
And so we started out with just one person. We kind of brought in some like residents, like interns, and like raised some people up that way. And so our film teams, for most of its existence, has fluctuated between 1 and 3 people.
Okay.
But these days, Zach is leading the team. Like I said, he's our film team director. So he's giving leadership to the types of things that we're creating. Just like guiding the whole team in a lot of different ways. And then structurally, like under Zach, we have senior filmmakers, myself and then Brian sitting over there operating that other camera. And then like structurally under that, we have some other like filmmakers. But like I said earlier, we all function as journalists.
Yeah.
So we're each of us kind of doing all different parts of the process. We all have different strengths. So just depending on what projects come in, we're kind of assigning those out to different people based on the nature of the project and what we think like each person can uniquely contribute to that project.
Yeah.
And for us, like that model has worked really well. It's encouraged a culture of collaboration where we're all like bringing the best parts of ourselves and our creativity to the table.
Yeah.
And a culture of like humility where, you know, even though we have a little bit of a hierarchy, like all of us are serving on each other's sets. Like Zach will PA on anybody's set.
That's
like,
awesome.
It's not like a hugely rigid structural thing.
Yeah.
So it just encourages this culture of like even playing field creatively, which has been awesome for the culture of our team.
We've also got a full-time like film producer,
Okay.
which kind of holds us all together.
Yeah.
And a full-time, film team writer that doubles as our audio guy. He helps PA.
Yeah.
Like our team functions is kind of what Kevin is saying. We're all hands on deck to make whatever the vision that's being cast happen.
Well, let's park in the team thing because I think this is honestly pretty inspiring, but then also very helpful for people out there because, like you said, it could be fully staffed. This whole thing could also look pretty similar in a volunteer way.
Yeah.
You know, and the culture you're talking about, you know, we somewhat cheekily titled the episode the fantastical and functional future of filmmaking, which just felt so like such a filmmaker's title for the episode. But the actual the twist on that is what we're talking about isn't the new technology or the new methods. It's really the new idea of collaboration, which for a lot of artists is a very new idea.
Yeah.
Because maybe you're a filmmaker out there and you're used to like, I do everything. So I write the whole thing, I shoot the whole thing, I edit the whole thing, I color the whole thing, and I export the whole thing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of control in that, which can be really gratifying for yourself. There's also a lot of burnout in that. And you're also probably not, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but probably not actually getting the best product.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like from what you guys are saying, you created a team that is somewhat antithetical to that. So where everyone is able to collaborate on a lot of things. So Zach, from where you sit as kind of leading the film team, what are the things intentionally that you're doing on a day-to-day basis probably to help spirit and create that culture of collaboration?
Yeah, I think a big thing is that's like when you're leading a team and you want to be able to have input. That's not just like, okay, my boss is going to come and tell me what to do. at least for me, is just like making sure that people that I work with and that are on the team like know that like first I love them and that I'm here to make like their piece as good as it can be. So it's not like about getting my ideas. And my personality is very like kind of harsh sometimes. So like I think it can come off that way. So just making sure as a leader, like you're being invested in the people that are under you, right? So if Kevin has an idea, I'm here to champion it,
Right.
and make sure it's the best it can be, and get as many people involved and get behind it, right? And if you're not doing that, it's just harder. People are going to be more against you giving feedback, more against you being involved in what they're doing, and it's going to probably make a worse product. What you're saying too at the beginning was like, if you don't have voices and other hands in what you're making, like, cool, you can have all the control you want,
Right.
Your piece is always going to be capped at what your skill level is at.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you're amazing at editing, but you're not the best at shooting, or you're not the best at even writing.
Yeah.
You're always going to be limited at that. And so our team is full of amazing people that have what Kevin was saying earlier, like very specific kind of skill sets of where they're like excellent at.
Yeah.
And when we're all working together, it makes that piece just so much better.
Just really championing the piece.
Yeah, I think
All of
you're
you.
the piece, and you're championing the people behind it, right?
Yeah.
So like, you don't want to make pieces at the expense of people.
Right.
Because then like the piece that you're making, right? If what we're making is to glorify Christ and to bring people to know him and to show the beauty of his creation and everything's pointing to him, but we're killing our people to do it, that's kind of, you're losing the point of what you're doing.
Totally. Yeah.
For sure.
So for me, it starts first with the people, and then those people like feel loved and they feel cared for, even in the stressful times, because there's always gonna be stressful times in film life. Then they're going to be more apt to get behind everybody else that's on the team.
Yeah.
Because if everybody feels that and they're kind of being led that way, then they're going to be like, oh, cool, I'm going to do that for you.
Yeah.
And we're going to be bought in on everything that we're doing. Even if sometimes like we don't understand the why of what we're doing.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we get a lot of those, but it's about the people first, I think.
Yeah, man, I think that's huge. Like, we always talk about, like, we want to glorify God with, like, what we're making, like, the actual product. But, like, we believe it's equally as important to glorify him in, like, the process of how we're doing it, of how we're treating people along the way, both, like, inside our team and outside of our team.
Yeah.
The way that we're, even our, like, mindset, what we're coming into set with, like, setting our pride aside, all of those sorts of things. Like, we believe that, God is honored equally in both of those. And honestly, even if your goal is just to get the best product at the end of the day, if you are constantly prioritizing the product and like burning your people out, sure, maybe, the first time you do that, your video is going to be 10% better.
Yeah.
But then over like the long arc of what you're doing, ultimately you're driving people towards like an unhealthy place.
Yeah.
And people aren't going to create their best art from an unhealthy place.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we realize that the best art that we make is going to come from a place where we're intimately connected with God, where we're hearing from the Spirit on a daily basis, where we're well rested and creating from a place of like overflow and not from a place of like digging out the last dregs of what we have to offer. That idea of like prioritizing people rather than just the final process all the time, I think is final product all the time is huge to what we're doing.
Yeah. You mentioned the stressful times. And so I actually want to ask Kevin about those times because, operating inside of this culture, you've probably operated, I'm guessing you've operated inside of this culture and you've probably operated outside of it. For sure. And probably had stressful times in both, because art and creating things on a budget or on a timeline can be stressful, especially when maybe you have expectations or somebody's going to give you feedback on that.
Yeah.
So has it changed kind of how you, I want to say feel, but more than that, maybe how you are processing stressful times, like existing inside of this kind of culture?
Yeah, 100%. I think for me, the key to navigating those stressful times is, like, first and foremost, it sounds so fun, like basic and fundamental, but just prioritizing like time with God. If I'm working a 14-hour day, 16-hour day, whatever, like that doesn't mean that I don't need to spend 30 minutes with Jesus that morning.
Right.
Like, without fail, if I skip that time in the morning, that makes the rest of the day so much worse.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to skip that when we're busy, but just putting like huge priority on actually like spending that time connected to God is the biggest thing. That's kind of helped me navigate that. And I think in the church, it's especially easy to slip into this idea of like, it's stressful, but that's okay because like I'm doing this for God. This is for the kingdom. Like, it's okay if I'm working like all these crazy hours and I'm like a burnt out husk at the end of the day. Like, it's for God. It'll be fine. But I think I've had to go through the process of learning like over time, when do I need to, sacrifice myself a little bit in order to like make this thing happen? And then when do I need to like set boundaries in order to like protect myself over the long arc and keep myself from, building up into bitterness and to keep my team from like sliding into unhealth. So just within the context of the church, knowing like when it's time to sacrifice and then when it's time to like rest is, something that we're definitely all still trying to learn on a day-to-day basis. But has been hugely important for being healthy over the long term.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about other teams now and maybe how this could be helpful. Is that something that you trust Zach to help you kind of see outside of yourself sometimes? Because there are moments when you're just like, man, I love this thing. I'm working. Zach needs to say like, hey, you've been running, like take a second. Like, is that kind of a dynamic that y'all have?
Yeah.
And then you also lead a team. So is that something that you're also trying to learn how to lead your team to do?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think generally passion attracts people who are like young and hungry and really, really love what they do. And I think that's true about a lot of like, especially artists in the church. Like you really love what you're doing. And so it's very easy for you to burn yourself down and to like justify it. And I think we were talking about the team earlier. Like that's one of the most important aspects of team, I think, is having people who will speak that over you, help you like cut it off when it's time for you to cut it off, and support you during the times when you feel like you are like starting to run on empty. So having like a leader that you can trust that is going to like lead and guide you in that way. I mean, that's changed so much about my day-to-day here at Passion.
Well, Zach, then how do you manage the tension of there's a dedeadline? But also I can see my guys starting to like fray at the edges a little bit. Like how do you internalize that and what steps do you take?
For me, I don't know if it's the best way. I'll step in a lot of like, cool, we have X amount of projects, we're doing things. I'll just take things on without even like kind of putting them down the field of like, hey, here's what we have. I'll just be like, I'll take 3, 4, or 5 things before they're even like input into our tracking thing. Or just kind of like, it's taking us a while, right? So now that I feel like our guys are more comfortable with us as people and me as a leader, like I feel like they're more open too, of just being like, man, I need this time off. We have like a shared calendar with everybody of like, man, on your weekends, the weekends that just in case something happens that you can't do anything, put that in there. Like let your people know that you can't do certain things. And it makes things harder. Because we have to work around it. For me, I got to sacrifice on different ends to do it. But for me, it always just goes back to people, man. If my people aren't stoked to be working at where they're at, if they're not stoked to be working with me and what we're doing as a team, like our videos are going to suck. And working together is going to suck. Like our team is just not going to enjoy being around each other. And then at the end of the day, we're going to lose everybody in 5 months and 2 years and whatever. So for me, it's about like making sure my people are healthy, and sometimes at the expense of me, but our team is also good at like rallying around each other of like, okay, as much as I'll be like, hey, Kevin, go home and do this, he tells me the same thing of like, yeah, it's great, man. I'm going to go home, but you've been working this too.
Yeah, hey,
like,
you're still here.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Let's do it. So it's definitely like a support for like on both ends of like, hopefully my guys, like I could say this and my guys sitting over here like, no way, dude. Of just like, everybody has boundaries that they can come and set. But also everybody knows we have times where it's like, you're gonna work 20 hours today.
Totally.
And this week is gonna be like an 80-hour week. But knowing that like on the back end of that, it's like, you've got a couple days off, you can do this, you can go do this.
Man, I think 2 huge things are like creating that culture of like vulnerability where people feel like it's okay for them to say like, hey, I'm tired. I think it's like a lot of times you don't want to admit that like you're, at your end, you don't want to admit that you need some time off. But I think like as a leader, helping like draw that out of people and create, and like when they do ask for time off, like coming around that and supporting them and accepting that and creating a culture where like it's safe to kind of not be okay for a little bit and to need some time to get back to zero, I think is huge. And then I think another huge thing is just as a leader, like being willing to kind of stand in the gap for your people. So I think a lot of times we feel like, there's a lot of pressure from, externally for us to like get a certain thing done. but maybe our people don't have the capacity. And it's not like, whenever people ask requests, it's whether that's like your pastoral team or other like ministry teams, like they're not trying to like take advantage of you or use you and like burn you down. Like nobody's coming in with malicious intent. But sometimes like we do get requests that are just outside the capacity of what we do. Yeah. And people just don't realize that. And so I think like as a leader, having those conversations with like people outside of the team about like, hey, this is like what my team is carrying right now. This is like what it would take to actually support like what you're asking right now. Yeah. And like at the moment, we're just not really able to do that. Like being willing to kind of like be the bad guy and like stand in the gap for your team is so important. And I think something that we're all like practicing and getting better at.
It just goes back to people what we were saying earlier of like, if the leaders of those ministries know that your heart is for them and what they're needing, they'll be willing to compromise and change things and kind of go back and work around with it. Yeah. Totally. Because they know that you want like their team and their mission to win because we're all ultimately working for the same thing.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting that there's probably somebody who's like, I thought this was going to be a very technical filmmaking podcast episode. Like what's happening? But what we're all kind of getting at is the idea of like to make the best films, which is every filmmaker's goal. To write the best songs, which is every songwriter's goal. To lead the best team, to be the best artist, to be the best designer. What you're talking about is actually there's an internal health that has to be prioritized. And that maybe for a lot of us, that's actually the future of filmmaking is like actually working together, doing things in a way that prioritizes our health, our walk with God. Like we're not sacrificing that. We'll sacrifice the time. Yeah. We'll sacrifice, our ability, but what we won't sacrifice is our health and our like relationships and then our relationship with Christ. Maybe that's actually the future of this thing and that's where the best stuff is made. So I think that's really powerful. And I appreciate you guys saying that. Let's get into some of the nitty gritty because I know that you guys have recently kind of revamped your pitch process. So let's like start with, for somebody who is just getting into it and like, okay, well, how do I create a beautiful pitch? Let's talk about that and kind of walk somebody through maybe the whole process of how you guys create a film. So does it usually start with a request? Is it kind of an idea that your team has? Like how does it start? And then from there, let's go through the pitch process.
Yeah, it's both of those. So like if we have like a big event we know is coming up or Easter or Christmas, we'll work on ideas for that. And then if it's a request from somebody, we'll work on that too.
And how far ahead of time, ideally, are you working on ideas for that stuff? Realistically, like if you were trying to give somebody some advice.
I think recently we've just had some shifts in our creative team as a whole that we've been able to start working ahead, hopefully on things, right? So we're already talking about Christmas a little bit. We're already talking about our Above and Beyond thing that comes in August. We're hopefully getting into a rhythm of working ahead. We haven't historically done that.
Right.
So
there have certainly been times where we shot a conference opener 4 days before conference or a Christmas video 2 days before. So if that's you in your church, wherever you're at,
we get it.
I get it. That's okay. You're going to make it. I promise.
So a request comes in or just an idea, pops into your head. So what's the next part?
Yeah. For us, not every video warrants a whole pitch process.
Okay.
Some ministries or some people that request things like know exactly what they want. So we'll just kind of get the ball rolling on exactly that. If it's like a creative idea and we're pitching, hey, you need to understand this to get behind what I'm doing. Then we'll go through a process on our team of just kind of ideating, throwing out different ideas, kind of culling through all the bad stuff and getting to like, this is what it should be. Before it would be
out. You have a process inside your team first?
So
you're pitching internally first. What is that like? Because again, that must require a ton of safety and vulnerability because you're not even just like, this is the best idea, let's take this right to the pastor. You're pitching inside your team.
It's we allow people to like champion their ideas to us and like, hey, go write your idea, pitch it to us, and we're going to come back and kind of work around with it. A good one is a guy named Topher on our team is working on this Father's Day piece, and he had an idea. I think he worked with you and with Hamilton, who's on our team, of just like, hey, here's my general thoughts. He kind of went back and worked on some feedback. He talked with Evan, another guy on our team. He went through some more thoughts. He came and pitched it again to me and Kevin, and we said, no, change all of that. All of that work you just did. Let's go back to this other idea you had.
Whoa.
And graciously, he was like, cool. Like, I'll go back and rework all of this. And that's before we've talked about it or pitched it to anybody outside of our team.
Okay, so we have to park because what you just described is maybe like every artist person of just like, I have put in the time. I know I've put in enough work. This will absolutely get approved because I put in the time and the work.
Yeah.
That does not always happen.
No.
So you both are leading teams of artists and you're artists yourselves. How do you, let's start with you as people. When you do that, how are you possibly walking in open-handed enough that your leader could say change everything? Like, what does that look like to be that open to critique and feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's really like two keys to that. The first is something we talk about a lot just in creative circles, is just this idea that we are not what we make. That like our identity as creatives is very distinct and different and separate from the things that we are outputting as a creative. Like, it's so easy to, especially if you've, poured your heart and soul and time into something, it's so easy to like hold that so close to yourself. Yeah. And then it feels like if they're criticizing this thing, then they're criticizing me and they're criticizing like my creative ability. And it's easy to like let that, kind of spiral into like how you view yourself and your self-worth. But just coming to a place where you're able to divorce like your identity from your output, I think is the biggest thing, and it's something that I know I personally still like deal with on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. But then I think the other key is just coming in with a sense of like humility and this idea that you are existing under leadership that is God ordained. I heard a friend of mine recently said that like God, he moves the hearts of kings and pharaohs. He can also control like the heart of your supervisor. Yeah. And so if you're like setting yourself up under leadership of a supervisor, you can trust that like God and his sovereignty and like the authority that he's granted them, that like you can trust that.
Yeah. That's great.
Wow.
For me, outside of those two things obviously are perfect. Yeah. It's just doing it. Like, you build up kind of like a tolerance of like, cool, maybe I don't have the best ideas all the time. And sometimes you will. Sometimes you'll go with the pitch and people will be like, yeah, it's perfect. Everything is great with it. But like, it helps you kind of work that muscle, and it works on your humbleness too, right? Like, there's so many times I'll go in with pitches that we've worked on as a team, that I've worked on with other people around, and I'm like, yeah, this is the one. Yeah. We recorded a VO, we got a track, and I'll be with leadership and they'll be like, nah, man, that's not it. Like, why did you think that was it? And I'm like, it took a bit of me to just be like, what? You obviously don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. I do this for a living. The artist response. You guys, and it took a while for me to be like, oh, wait, exactly what you're saying. Like, these guys were put here for a reason. And they probably know better what's better for our organization too. Right. So I'm not just making a piece that's for me or for my cool film boys that are gonna be like, that's dope.
For the Vimeo staff.
Yeah, exactly. We're making it for our house, and the leaders of our house know what's best for our house. Yeah. And so just being open-handed with that and realizing, like, again, if we're able to collaborate with our film team, I should be able to collaborate with everybody else that's on our extended team.
Yeah. All the way up to our start there. Yeah. Right? It's like a grassroots movement of humility and collaboration. For sure. Like, it starts with us, and then as that goes up, we're less sensitive because we weren't putting on our boxing gloves with our own team. And like, you fight there and you're kind of beat up, and then you go to the next level. It's like, no, like, we got a lot of, it's getting reps is what you're saying. Yep. We're getting so many reps in our team that when we show up to the real thing and it happens, it's not just the most devastating thing.
Yeah. Totally. And understand that everybody wants the best, right? So they don't, like, it's not what you were saying. It's not about you as a person. Yeah. They want the best idea, and they want to be part of that and say, hey, let's tweak this. This could make this better. This could do this. We've had things where we went out and shot. It's gotten through the pitch. It's gotten approved. It's done this. And Kevin is the most recent person to deal with this, of like, we're at the edit stage, we're doing things, and I'll come in, or someone will come in and be like, we're not going to show that. Like, we need to go and do this. We can do this. And those times I feel like are the hardest times, because you're like, that was approved. Right. We just did all this work. We worked 70 hours this past week to do this. I've been editing this week, another 40, 50 hours, and you're going to come in and be like, Right. Because there's just a larger story where you're talking about the leadership is like, they're looking at things at a 30,000 foot view. And so you may have made a piece for an event, and it's just like, yeah, but we've actually have something that actually fits this moment
that'll help people have an encounter with Jesus
Yeah.
slightly better. But we're fighting for like every inch possible for someone to lower their walls. Just let them down a little bit.
Yeah.
And so it may just be like, hey, this wasn't at the
Yeah.
end of the day. This
And I
isn't
think
right.
like the biggest thing, you know, when you receive some, you know, news like that, we're like not going to do this thing that I worked on. It's easy for that to feel devastating. But I
Yeah,
think the biggest thing is like remembering that we're not called to like produce a product.
Right.
We're really like not even called to like the process. Like
Yeah.
ultimately what we're called to is just to seek Jesus, to like know him and to be faithful.
Yeah.
And if you are like okay with that, if you really like get that deep in your soul that like your only calling is to like know God
Yes.
and to like walk in what he's, you know, given you, then you're free to like let the result just be what they may.
Yes.
Whether that's the piece playing and the whole room weeping, or whether it's getting cut, you know, 5 minutes before it's actually supposed to be shown in the room.
Yeah.
Just getting to that point where like your only concern is like faithfulness to the call, and you're able to trust God with whatever that looks like is huge.
It's really beautiful because the calling, I just want to, what you just said is so important and so beautiful, that the calling is just to make much of Jesus. The assignment at the time may be filmmaker, maybe editor, could be for 6 months or 60 years. Your assignment may change, but the calling remains the same. So you're saying like what we're talking about, the open-handedness and sort of like the lightness of what you're carrying, even a big heavy thing of like kind of carrying it lightly, is because you're secure in your calling.
Yeah.
And so the assignment can change and modify and be manipulated, but it's just like, well, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm put on earth for one reason.
Yeah.
And it's just to glorify God.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I think one other thing I would maybe add to that, just to bring it down to a really practical level, is in the creative process, like we love to build in flexibility to pivot like whenever necessary. Like even when we're planning an idea or when we're shooting, we love to try and like cover our bases so that if we do end up needing to pivot, like we're able to. Like for example, we shot a piece for Christmas a couple years ago, and the ending of that piece was kind of like sad and kind of heart-wrenching. Like one of the main characters died at the end. And so yeah, not good vibes a little bit.
Movie stuff.
Yeah, movie stuff. But we knew like that might be kind of a tough sell to like pastoral leadership on like Christmas. And so we shot like a version of that scene where like, okay, this father character is like dead at the end. And then we also shot a scene where you kind of get just like barely this hint of like, oh, he's not actually dead. I think he's alive. And then we shot another version of that scene where you actually like see this father character come back and they have this like picturesque Hallmark like happy reunion. And so then when we go into the post process, we know like, okay, if leadership gives us the feedback that this is too sad at the end, we have 2 more options for how to like reconcile that. And we don't just have to like totally scrap that piece.
That's great.
And so whenever we can, like building in that flexibility in different parts of the process has saved a number of pieces for us.
Yeah. That is so smart. Just one flip of the coin here on this same thing, and then we can kind of keep rolling on what the entire filmmaking process looks like for you guys. But you kind of hinted at it, Zach, but having to walk in as the leader and say, I see you, I see the work you've done. This isn't it. Or even, giving the feedback on the Father's Day piece you mentioned of like, this looks awesome, but I need you to rework it. Like you've mentioned a little bit of relationships are obviously very important, but what is your mindset when you know that that's coming, you schedule a meeting and you're gonna have to walk into the room? Like, how do you take a minute to kind of reset? Like, what do you do before you give that kind of feedback?
Yeah, usually I'll pray for like 2 minutes because one, if you couldn't tell by the podcast already, I have a very just kind of like monotone delivery and just like personality is very much like,
Right.
And so I pray for like wisdom, but also just for like the words to say and just like the attitude of how I deliver things. And I try to make sure like the dudes that I'm delivering hard news to. No, it's like, man, it's not about you. It's not about me. The piece is serving like a purpose. And sometimes that like, just because we're cutting it doesn't mean we're not going to go back to it. Like maybe we just need more time to make this better. We need more time to do this. But mostly it's just like, hey, like how is this a win for our house? And hopefully helping them understand that and making sure they're emotionally and mentally like okay. I think in that moment, people are gonna be like, yeah, it's great. Like, cool, I get it. I'm frustrated. But for me, I'm almost like to an annoying point to where I'll just keep going back and being like, hey, are you good? Kevin knows this. I'll be like, hey, how are you feeling about that piece? You know, to where like I'm hoping of like I'll get a genuine response outside of that, like kind of like, cool, I don't want to show that I'm angry about this. And allowing my guys to be okay with, no, dude, you can get angry with me and be like open and frustrated, because that's going to help you get past the process in general, right? Totally. Like if you're just going to hold on to it and be angry about it, and not saying any of my people on the team.
Yeah, but any artist does that.
Yeah. Just like having, to what you were saying, the vulnerability and the option to be like, no, I don't agree with the decision that you made, or I'm very angry about this. This frustrates me. All of those things. Part of my role is to be that person of like, just come and tell me that. Yeah. Let's work through that together and get you to a healthier spot on the back end of this. So that way we can keep moving forward with everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Buy-in doesn't mean you don't feel things.
Yeah. 100%.
Being a part of a team doesn't mean that you don't have opinions anymore.
Exactly.
Or any of that, but it's making the choice to say like, I will let this affect me for as long as it has to, and then I will move on.
Yeah.
And I'll choose to basically sign up once again and say like, okay, great.
Yeah.
What's the next thing? Yeah.
And you should be able to trust your leaders to like voice that.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the ability or like the place to voice those things, you're always just going to hold it on. And sometimes that leads to gossip, like it leads to other things to where you're just going to people around you being like, well, that sucks, doesn't it?
Right.
Instead of like, man, let me just get this out, and then we can get to a healthy place.
Yeah. And then just quickly, you said that you know that you're monotone, so you pray for wisdom and words, which I think just is for somebody out there of just like, hey, recognize your weakness.
Yeah.
And then ask for God to help you in the moment where your weakness could be potentially like damaging to somebody because of a misunderstanding. You know, if you just walked in, did your monotone thing and left, that's not you actually not caring. It would be a misunderstanding or misperception that you didn't care. Yeah. So I think that's really cool that you do that. Yeah. I think that's fantastic.
I mean, that's a great segue back into what you're talking about, our process. Like the reason why we changed our process was the person before me was amazingly gifted at pitching and just kind of getting an idea across in a room, making like an ambiance of just like, hey, imagine this, walk with me. Yeah. That's not me. I'm in there and I'm like, hey, here's the idea, read the script. You like it, you don't, we'll move on.
Yeah.
And understanding our organization, understanding my leaders, and saying, okay, maybe the best thing isn't for me to just do all the pitches. Like maybe I can get some voices from my team and allow them to be able to pitch their ideas in like a contained, concise version.
Yep.
So that way it doesn't just hinge on me and my abilities to pitch.
Yeah.
Like that's something that I'm obviously working on every day, but it's not something that I'm going to ever be amazing at. Right. It's just not my skill. It's not my gifting. And being okay with that and understanding what's best for our team and organization is changing and pivoting to something else.
Yeah. Which also probably helps, you know, Kevin, if you are the one who put together the pitch, it's hard then to go, okay, Zach, okay, pitch my thing in front of leadership, because he's, you know, you just know that relationship and you're like, gosh, I wish I was in that room because I wish I knew what was happening. And the way you guys have kind of changed things, you have a presence in the room for your own pitch, which I think is super helpful. So you pitch it, it gets approved, you go into shoot. Can we go back to something you said earlier, which is anybody on your team will just show up and help out in any kind of way on any shoot? Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, one of the last pieces we made for Lyft, Zach was there for the first day, and he was a bus extra.
Yep.
Nice.
And that was it. He just sat on a bus, and that was it.
Yeah. I don't think you used any shots of me being that extra.
You were blurry in the background for a couple points. You were a good black blob. But yeah, I mean, that's so important to the culture of our team. Yeah. It's just this idea that everyone has their own strengths. Everyone has like projects to lead, and no matter where you're at, like in the org chart, we want to like support each other's projects however we can. Yeah. I mean, Jesus talked about it all the time. Like first would be last. Like he washed disciples' feet. Like Jesus is there's so many pictures of him just being overwhelmingly like humble and putting himself last. And we want that to be true about our team too. Yeah. No matter who's like in charge.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful.
And if we're championing an idea, like we should put it into action too, right?
Yeah.
If I'm all about like, hey, your idea is great, let's do it, but I'm never going to be involved in it. I'm too important to be over here.
Right.
Like they're just going to feel that too. Like at some point it's going to be like, well, Zach's not really a part of it, or Kevin's not really a part of it because he's never on my shoots. Like, you need to build that trust of like, I'm going to be with you in the hard times that it takes to do this.
Yep.
As well as like support you and celebrate you when you're pitching it, you know?
And honestly, selfishly as a leader, like it's good for your soul too.
Oh yeah.
Just reminding myself that like I'm not too good to carry sandbags is just helps kill like the roots of pride that are so easy to like creep up as an artist.
And I mean, as anybody, like what a global principle too. Like if you're talking about, you could be at a church with 500 people, 50 people, and it's like, hey, we're all doing this food drive, and 3 people show up because everybody just kind of thought someone else was going to do it, you know?
Yeah.
So that's a really great, just like global leadership principle. I want to know, of all the roles then that could be happening on a shoot, what your favorites are. And I want to do it this way. I would like for you to encourage somebody who is just getting started in that specific role, with a few pointers of like, here's the best way to go about it, or here's what I love about it. Make sure you love this if you really want to get into it, that kind of thing. So all the way from pre-production, ideation, all that, to like release. What is your favorite part of the process, and how would you encourage somebody in that part?
Oh gosh. I mean, I can go first. You want me to go? I think I just naturally fall into liking directing the most. Because that's also a little bit different in our context of like, usually if you're directing your piece, you're the person that's going to edit it, and you're going to like probably color it, you're going to mix it, you're going to do all these things. So I like being able to have my hands involved in everything, because that's just kind of how my mind works. I'm like, I want to figure out how Evan is going to light and grip this, or how Kevin is going to like DP that. Like, that's dope.
Yeah.
So for me, it just allows me to have my hands in a lot of things without like having to be an expert on it. It allows me to like build a team of like, you're killing it at this, and I'm not as good as you, but like you can help me do this, and together we can do that.
Okay, but encourage a younger person on how to not, who they want to be a film director, how they don't micromanage.
Oh yeah.
That feels like that would be the natural.
I think knowing that people are better than you. Like, that's my biggest thing is like, I want to use people that are better than me. Yeah. There's a reason I don't cam up 99% of our projects anymore. Yeah. Is because I know everybody on the team is better than me. And so there's like a joke of like, all right, we're going to shoot B-roll, we're going to capture, a recap thing. And I'm like, hey, I can help. And everybody's like, yeah, you could, maybe. It's really like, I want to work with the best people. Yeah. And if I'm going to do that, I need to know that I'm not the best. But if you're going to be a good director, I think having some knowledge in each one of those things helps you communicate with all those people. Yeah. So being open-handed with it, but understanding this is what it takes. Because when you're asking people, hey, I want you to light this and I need you to do this, you need to know that like, maybe that's like a 3-day job. Right. And what you're asking isn't possible. So it allows you to be like knowledgeable and communicate well with the people that are in those like expert positions. Yeah. But you don't have to be the person that's like, this is exactly how it happens. Right.
Love that. Yeah. Kevo?
I think for me, my favorite position on set is DP, or if you're not like a filmmaker, director of photography, which basically they sit under the director and they're kind of in charge of all the visuals. So I love it for a lot of reasons. I mean, mostly just because I like pretty pictures. It's very childish and simplistic. But more than that, I love being in that position where you're like sitting under and supporting like somebody else's vision, but you're also kind of leading a team. Yep. And so you're able to like both bring your best to support like what somebody else is doing above you, but then you also are able to like rely on incredibly talented people under you to make the work that like you're doing and like the thing that you're trying to lead better than you could ever make it. So I love it because of the collaboration, and I love it because it's such a fun mix of like the high-minded like artistic things where you're trying to create images that lean into like symbolism that are have layers of like depth to why you compose them in a certain way or like lit them in a certain way, where you're like making these artistic choices that are very like deeply rooted in the kind of emotions you're trying to evoke. And it's also so you have like the high level artist stuff, and then you have like the low level like nerd stuff of like learning cameras and lenses and lighting technology and diffusion fabrics and halation filters and like all of like the super technical stuff. So it's a really fun blend of the like principles and also like the practical.
How would you encourage a young filmmaker who's like, oh, pretty pictures, I like those too?
I honestly think the biggest thing is those two things that I just talked about are cultivating a love for both of those things.
Yeah.
So if you're just a super gear nerd and all you care about is cameras, then maybe read some classical literature and see how like symbolism and foreshadowing and stuff are working out in the context of storytelling. And then, in your next piece, think about how you can use like visuals to, give foreshadowing to like actually tell a story.
Yeah.
And then on the other end, if that's like your natural inclination is you're just like super high-minded, like principled kind of head in the clouds artist, like get down and just do like a 2-hour YouTube dive on, camera sensors or whatever. So just, I think the best DPs are really strong in both of those areas.
Yeah.
And so cultivating like a love for both of those, and especially strengthening like whatever area you're weakest in, I think is probably the best advice I would give.
I love that. All right, last question. And this one, I think maybe the most important one, because we spent a lot of time talking about team. And like we said, it doesn't have to be staff. It could easily be a team of volunteers. We call them door holders. Could be people that you just like to hang out with. Could be your friends making backyard wrestling videos. Who knows? But there are definitely people who will be watching or listening to this, and they are the only person at their church. And so they are actually responsible for all of it. And boy, would they love a team.
Sure.
But right now, that's just not the position that they're in. I would just love for you guys to encourage them.
Yeah. You can go first. Go for it.
Man, I mean, I think maybe the biggest thing is just every team starts with one person. And then once you recruit one more person, now you have a team.
Yeah.
That's how it started. That's how it started for us at Passion.
Yeah.
And that one person doesn't necessarily have to be, a professional VFX artist who's working on blockbuster movies. That one person who you recruit for your team could be a student in your high school ministry who just got a DSLR and is kind of interested in photos or whatever. I think just like taking that step to just build a relationship with one person and bring them into your creative process, no matter like where they're at, they're going to be good at things that you're not good at. They're going to be able to see things that you can't see. So starting from the ground level, just starting with one person, building that team is huge. That'd be my biggest encouragement. Is just start from where you are and trust God to build to wherever He has for you to build.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I would say don't be afraid to ask leadership for help. Because a lot of times, like, nobody really understands what it takes to make a film thing.
Right.
And we even have people here that don't really know what it takes, the production it takes to put something like this together.
Yeah.
And they might not know like that you need tons of help. So I would say one, just be vulnerable and talk to your leadership and be like, hey man, are we able to get me some help?
Yeah.
And that might look different for every place that you're at. That might be like, crazy, we need to get some more staff people for you, or we just need to figure out a way to get what we call door holders, volunteers involved, or we can have your friend come in and contract a little bit. There's a lot of opportunities, but I think you just need to ask first and communicate well with the people above you and around you.
Yeah.
And then exactly what Kevin said, like, get your friends involved, get the people at your church involved, because there's a lot of people that want to do what we're doing that have no idea that they can do it. Even if they don't like have any experience doing it, they can come in and help move a light. They can come in and help set up some stuff on the floor. They can gaff the cords for you.
Yeah.
They can do a lot of things that like would help just kind of speed up things, and down the road a year or two would pick up enough that they can just be huge assets for you.
Yeah.
Man, it may be like one more encouragement, because I know I've been in that place where I was like the only guy, and so many different places, including like here at Passion, is just to like, yes, look towards a future where you have 60 other people on staff and you're making $1 million features or whatever your high-minded dream is. But as you look towards the future, just like cultivating contentment in the present.
That's really great.
And realizing that like wherever you're at, whatever budget level you're working at, whatever team level you're working at, like whatever types of projects you've been entrusted with, like God hasn't forgotten about you.
Yeah. That
like the Alpha and Omega creator of the universe has appointed you to be in this position at this time in history to be doing like the things that you're doing. And the word says like those who are faithful with little, like God won't trust much to. Yeah. So wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, like as long as you're being faithful, seeking God, like, doing the best work that you can do, like you can trust Him with whatever results you're getting now and whatever the future is going to look like.
That's beautiful.
Pretty phenomenal place to end.
That's right.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys again for joining us for the Passion Creative Podcast, and we will see you next time.